Hello everyone, thank you for coming back. This is Nails, Crime, and Coffee. No, Nails, Coffee, and Crime. With me, Caitlin Quiles. If you are new to my channel, what I do is I just record myself doing my nails and then doing a voiceover. I just give you a little true crime case to talk about. Today I am also collabing with a couple other YouTubers. I'm going to put them all below. We're going to do like a sequence today. I am the first one to go. We are doing a floral theme. So that being said, I will be showing you how I apply water slide decals by NashlyNails. I have all the links of everything I use in the description box below, and as well as like some discount codes and cool stuff like that. Anyway, water slide decals are really easy to do, and I feel like it's the most simplest way to just add some nail art to your manicure. In today's crime talk, I will be giving you just like a little bit of a rundown of what happened Operation Independence Day. Before you start, just reprimanding me, just know what I have to say isn't completely positive about what happened in Operation Independence Day. It was conducted by the FBI along with so many other task force like your local police departments, etc. It was basically just a huge operation to target sex traffickers and get them off the streets. You might be like, oh, well, what's bad about that? It's who they like put in handcuffs in the end. You think like, I thought, this would be, getting the website shut down that promote prostitution. Go for the big wigs, go for the pimps, go for that. Enough with my chit chat. And oh, one more thing. This kind of isn't a local story. I wanted to stay doing local stories. I do mention there was a Mississippi case in this operation, but I couldn't really find anything cool. So this was like really something that piqued my interest. And also, just a few months before this happened, this happened in July of 2019. Back in February of 2019 in Atlanta, my cousin's ex-husband, who I'd known for like many years, like I grew up with them together, so it was like I always considered him my cousin. So it was someone close to me, kinda. They had like just gotten a divorce like a year prior to this, as well as my brother's as well as my brother's best friend's fiance. Both of these guys were in a similar operation targeting sex traffickers, and they were the ones purchasing the sex. So my cousin's ex-husband was 32, Dylan Wynot, and then my brother's best friend's fiance was, what the heck's his name? Darwin Fernandez, who was 22. So it was called Operation Interception. It's really cool, but that's not what this one is about. But like this hit kind of close to home because there was two people like I knew that just like got convicted of this crap. Well, anyway, I'm gonna stop talking for now, but leave all your thoughts and comments in the comment section below. Anyway, enough with the chit chat, and I hope you guys enjoy. Thanks. Operation Independence Day took place in 2019 during the month of July and included 33 FBI field offices, 86 task forces, and over 400 different law enforcement agencies. This was basically just it was a way to fight sex trafficking, was the whole operation. They had so many different ways of doing it, but that's basically the gist of it. It was just to stop sex trafficking and convict those involved. So total, they conducted over 160 operations during the entire month of July, and there was over 100 adolescents that were rescued. 82 of them were minors. allegedly selling sex, and then 15 of those, or I'm sorry, the youngest was 15. There was 21 teenagers who were also possibly exploited, so I guess that means they hadn't conducted any sex crimes yet, but they were expliciting themselves to do so. So I found it was a little difficult to find exactly where they were conducting all of this. According to one source, it was only in Atlanta, Houston, and Denver. But if you look at all other sources, it was basically around the entire U.S. that was all this was happening at one time. So there was 76 suspected traffickers that were arrested, and only 60 cases were open. Federal investigations were opened. So I'm assuming the other 7, they just didn't have enough to hold them, or I'm not sure. Since this was the FBI, it's a little hard to find a lot of information about this. So I had to do a lot of outsourcing. There's a quote from the FBI director, Christopher Wray. He said, the FBI is fiercely focused on recovering child victims and arresting the sex traffickers who exploit them. Through operations like this, the FBI helps child victims escape the abusive life of sex trafficking. So there was a couple ways that they did this. So they weren't like tipped off, anything like that. It was all strategically planned. They would have several people making these fake accounts on these sex trafficking and prostitution websites, or just like, I mean, it's still prostitution, but it's more of like a laid back way. Like, it's just like your average people being like, hey, neighbor, come over and have sex for X amount of dollars. So it was kind of like that. It was websites, but then there was also more of like your prostitution stings, stuff like that. So these investigators were making these false accounts. Hang on, honey. These investigators were making these false accounts and pretending to be, a buying customer, I guess you could call it that. And then they would get to know them, talk for a couple days, and then they would schedule a meetup or transaction, whatever you want to call it. And at this point, they would come in and then they would talk to the people at the said place, location, whatever. And some of the time it went well. If you were a minor, you weren't prosecuted, you were just you were helped to get out of the situation. But if you weren't a minor anymore, then you very well were leaving, going to prison, and had a felony charge slapped on your ass. But every situation is different. Every situation is different. I can't stress that enough. How you got into that situation could have been out of pure necessity. Like it was the only way you could afford the lifestyle that you needed. You needed to support a child or a younger sibling, whatever the case may be. Or you were forced into it by a pimp or ringleader, whatever you want to call those people. So, but if you were 18 and got caught, you most likely got a felony charge, because prostitution is still illegal no matter the age, I want to say. But like a minor, definitely you can't consent to prostitution. So it's a little different once you hit adulthood. So that's where it got a little iffy in my research. Is if you were a minor, you were doing great. You got out, they saved you, and you got to go on with a normal life away from sex trafficking. If you weren't a minor, let's say you're 18, but you had been in the business for 3 years, you were forced into it, but you were 18, you most likely didn't get to just walk away. But it wasn't always that way. If they also were looking for people that were sold into sex trafficking, that like missing persons. So obviously if they found that you were, a missing person, but you were an adult, obviously you got off. But I feel like they didn't do a whole crap ton of investigating on some cases. I can't speak for all of them. Of course, there was over 60. So it's just some of them, you know, I feel like the people just didn't get the break that they needed. Okay, so I'm just going to read you off just a couple cases. So the first one, this was a good one. It was a young teenage boy. He was on one of these websites, and he was exploiting himself, eliciting himself to, you know, take money for sex. But apparently this was his first time. He had not actually performed the act yet, ever, on this website. So this was his first time. And then, so when he was greeted by investigators, they just, you know, told him the severity of everything and how he should never do this and the risk and yada yada. So they saved his life, because once you get in, it's hard to get out, let's face it. So he basically saved his life from sex trafficking, and he got to go on with his normal life. They, you know, hooked him up with some social workers, and that was it, which is good. That's how it's supposed to be. But let me read you off some cases where it just didn't pan out the way I feel should have happened. So the case that I'm going to be reading to you, I'm trying to find it, I have a bunch. Okay, so there was a 21-year-old sex worker. She ended up getting a felony charge, but she's 21. So I feel like at this age, you know, you might have been in the game a long time. Well, anyway, she picked up this teen girl, and the teen girl told police that this 21-year-old was giving her and encouraging her how to, you know, basically be a prostitute. So, and then, but I don't know much about this 21-year-old girl, but I feel like at this age, you're young enough, you probably have been doing this a while, especially if you're picking up other girls that are very young. It's probably just what happened to you, basically. Well, anyway, there was also found, there was a 4-year-old girl in there, but the 4-year-old girl was this 21-year-old's daughter, who supposedly was missing. So she was considered missing, and there's a felony order, or there's a custody order violation, which was in addition to her felony charge she got. And basically the police were portrayed as this 4-year-old was saved from being human trafficked. So there's a big difference between being human trafficking and sex trafficking, and then just taking your kid and running away. So it seems like what happened to this 20-year-old girl, she was in this business, she had a child, she was in an extremely abusive relationship, and she ran. Now, this is just speculation, but, you know, this is what is common. This is what you see a lot, is how people get into this business on their own. So, the real question is if these cases are any indication of how Operation Independence Day promised to help girls and young women, help, you know, get them out of whatever situation they're in, they are then putting them in handcuffs. I feel like this 21-year-old, she had a bigger, better story to tell for herself, but because of her line of work, and they just wanted to see it as they were saving this 4-year-old girl from being human trafficked, when most likely she was just being saved from a extremely abusive relationship. And this 21-year-old, she had no other options, no other way of supporting for her child, and then she might have been forced into this business, and then someone started making her bring in other recruits. So, I mean, you know, there's a lot more to it, but to just slap her with a felony charge and then a custody order violation, there's more to it. But, and I can't find any more information about this. But anyway, the teens found selling and generally sent on their way, you know, just with a few social service numbers. So all the teenagers, they are sent on their way. I don't know how much help they have got, because like, one, if this is your only source of income, or if you were forced into this business, do you need like a life jacket, you know, to be out in the world on your own so someone doesn't come hunt you down? Or like, what happens after that? They don't really explain. Well, the FBI Deputy Director John Pistol, he testified that only around 1/4 of teens are found in these operations and experience forced threats of being in sex trade. So, I mean, that means the other 2/3 were willy-nilly in it for the money. But I feel like it's not always that case. I feel like that's a really, really big statistic, saying that 2/3 of the people that are in sex trade as teenagers are in it because they want to, not because they were forced or whatever. So, I mean, you have like your good stories and your bad stories about how the teen boy, he was just let off, but then this 21-year-old, she was not. So, you know, it was just potato, I guess. Okay, so let me just read you off just a handful of cases. I won't really go into them, but this is just it. This wasn't just about the bad guys. This was about the people that were actually prostituting as well. And I don't really see a lot of like pimps getting arrested. So, okay, here we go. So the FBI joined July stings in northern Ohio, which led to 8 women being charged with prostitution and 1 woman being charged with promoting prostitution. And then in Pennsylvania, a woman she was referred to as the Monroeville Madam, and she was charged with prostitution. So she was the ringleader, I want to say. And then another man in Pennsylvania was charged with promoting prostitution. In Mississippi, 4 women and 1 man were arrested in prostitution sting in Warren County. And in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, there were 3 young women booked on prostitution charges, and 2 men were booked for aiding and abetting prostitution. In Jacksonville Beach, Florida, a prostitution sting conducted by the FBI with help of Jacksonville Police Department involved an undercover FBI agent posting as a customer who's looking for a prostitute at a Holiday Inn Express Beach Boulevard, after responding to an online website. Ultimately, 2 women and 1 man were arrested. In San Diego, 6 men were arrested for soliciting prostitution with the local police. The San Diego Human Trafficking Task Force and the FBI were all involved. Louisiana Alcohol and Tobacco Control agents, along with FBI agents, picked up 25 men for soliciting prostitution in Shreveport, Louisiana. The FBI agents worked with local cops and arrested 7 sex workers at a hotel in Baton Rouge. So, I mean, that just gives you a rundown. You know, they are still arresting the prostitutes, not just the ringleaders, in essence.
That's what I liked.
In Alabama, 49 sex workers and their facilitators were arrested around the Birmingham area. And we make these calls, this is a quote, we make these calls, end quote, said Vestavia Hills Police Captain Johnny Evans, describing the sting as, quote, they agreed to enact in a price, they come to where they are, end quote. So the FBI no longer reports the number of adult sex workers whom these initiatives claim as collateral. So, however, you know, local news and other law enforcement agencies are still kind of throwing those numbers out there, but the FBI is no longer throwing these numbers out there. So you know, it's kind of hard to tell big picture because there was a lot of mixed reports about exactly how many people were arrested, about how many people were saved. So it's very mixed, and I guess it just depends on the timeline of when these reports were posted. Is the timeline of when, of like an updated timeline. So I'm not really sure. And there wasn't a lot of like news broadcasting about this. I could find like little 3-minute clips here and there, but it really didn't dive into a lot of it. There was just a lot about that one kid in the beginning who he was, you know, exploiting himself for the very first time, and then he was let go and just told, you know, the severities of this line of work. So there's a lot of news about that, but not so much like the individual people that were actually convicted of crimes, or any more that were just let go and helped. Well, anyway, so here is near the end of the video. I did this a little different this time, so I'm still trying to find what is the happy medium on recording. I don't have a lot of time to really do this. I don't have a lot of quiet time. If you can hear, my son is in the background. So I appreciate you all watching, and thank you so much.